What's going on? Welcome to Tech with Sean, and I'm back with another Zephyrus G15 review, and today we have the RTX 3060 version. A lot of people have already reviewed the G15. You may have seen a lot of reviews for the white RTX 3080 version and other reviews, including my own, for the 8GB 3070 version of the G15. I'll link to my review of that up here. But I also wanted to take a look at this. This is the RTX 3060 version, and this comes in $300 cheaper than the 3070 one. This is $14.99 at Best Buy, and besides the GPU downgrade, you're also missing out on a little bit of storage. This comes with a 512 gig SSD instead of 1 terabyte. Now the 3060 is a step down from the 3070, and while that one has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, this has 6 gigabytes. But that's not the whole story. While the 3070 has 12 gigabit per second memory, this 3060 actually has 14 gigabit memory. While the 3070 is definitely going to pull ahead in some games, that faster memory is going to keep the 3060 pretty close on its heels in other titles, especially considering they both have the same base wattage of 80 watts. Even though this is a little cheaper, it has all the same, main features of the other Zephyrus G15s. You get that 165 Hz 1440p screen with really good color. You get that modern, sleek looking build. The black version has a single zone RGB keyboard. It has a nice big glass trackpad with Windows precision drivers. And while some of the units have some popping, a lot of them, including this one, have really good speakers. What I've found to get the best sound on this was to run Windows Update to get all the newest audio drivers, and then go into the Dolby Access app and set the sound to dynamic. Those new Ryzen 5000 chips are power efficient, so in combination with a big battery, this thing also delivers really long battery life for a gaming laptop. But it is a gaming laptop, right? So let's jump into some gameplay, and we'll also see how it stacks up against the RTX 3070 version of the G15. To get a general idea of the performance, I ran 3D Mark TimeSpy, and the 3060 G15 got 8,309. Compared to the 3070 version, that got 9,239, so a little over a 10% difference. Next was Forza Horizon 4, and at 1440p ultra settings, this clocked in at 91 frames per second. And by comparison, the 3070 version got 90 frames per second. If you look down at the GPU limited percentage, you'll notice we were actually CPU limited on both systems. So at 1440p ultra settings, both the 3060 and the 3070 were more than enough GPU for the 5900HS to handle. Now we have Far Cry New Dawn, and this is at 1440p high settings. This runs really well on these Ryzen CPUs. This is a CPU intensive game. And you'll notice that when we come into the final tally, we got 78 frames per second, which is really good for this benchmark, especially at 1440p. Interestingly enough, when we switch over to the 3070 results, that also got 78 frames per second. So that's pretty crazy. Two different games both getting the same results from these. I don't know if that's just because it was totally CPU limited, or maybe the difference in the VRAM speed helped close the gap a little bit, but it's interesting that they both had exactly 78 for the average. Next is the benchmark for Strange Brigade, and we ran this at 1440p on the ultra settings, but with motion blur turned off. And in this shooter, we got 101 frames per second. Moving on to GTA 5, you can see here what settings I'm running the benchmark at. And it held up obviously really well. We're hanging right around 100 frames per second, maybe 120. And this is going to be a real smooth experience if you want to play some GTA 5. It's not the most demanding game, so of course a laptop like this is going to do a good job, but hey, if you were curious, it's going to run GTA 5. Next is Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm running at this mix of settings I have here, and this is at 1440p, and this managed to stay over 60 frames per second. This should deliver a nice smooth gaming experience at 1440p, so nothing to really complain about with this one. And the benchmark ended up with a nice 69 frames per second average, so good to go on Horizon. Jumping into some Call of Duty Warzone, you can see the graphics settings here that I'm going to be running this at. And this kept it over 60 frames per second. It was mostly in the 70 to 80 frames per second range. Now this is a bot match, and the CPU temperatures do run higher in this game than most others. Now I'd only been in this match for just a couple of minutes, but we were already seeing CPU temperatures up about 90 degrees. I have heard people say that their CPU can get up to like 95 or 98 degrees when they're in a session of Warzone, and I totally believe them because it jumps up there pretty quick. If you wanted to shave some degrees off of there, you could either crank the fans up manually or maybe use the sliders in Armory Crate to reduce the wattage going to the CPU a little bit, but if you do that, you probably will lose some frames because this is such a CPU intensive title. But all in all, I was pretty happy with the Warzone experience on here, and I wouldn't have a problem at all playing it on this system. Next title we're taking a look at is Red Dead Redemption 2. Here is the settings that we're running it at. And here in the benchmark it was keeping it right around 60 frames per second. There were a couple of spots here in the real intense parts of San Denis where it was dropping below 60, so you might want to drop, a couple of settings down to get a couple frames back, but this is a lot more demanding than most parts of the game. And you're going to find a mix of settings that you're going to be happy with for playing RDR2 on this system. And finally, let's take a look at Cyberpunk 2077. Jumping into the settings, we have it on the Ray Tracing Medium preset, 1440p. And if we scroll down, I have the DLSS. We're going to set it on Performance. And then there's a couple of settings I'm going to change. So the volumetric clouds, we're going to kick that down a notch, and same with the volumetric fog. And those are just kind of intense settings that just kicking those down one notch is going to get us back some frames. But you can see at those settings, even at 1440p, we're staying over 30 frames per second, generally in the like 40-45 range, and this is totally playable. If you really need to have 60 frames per second, you're gonna, I assume, have to say no to ray tracing and just go back to the regular lighting. But for a cinematic type game like this and exploring Night City, I think this is a pretty decent frame rate, and it looks really good. Even on the medium ray tracing setting, the lighting is really impressive, and on this screen, the game looks really nice. So whether it's RTX on or RTX off, if you want to play Cyberpunk on the G15, even on this 3060 model, you're definitely going to be able to. This G15 is a pretty solid laptop, and for the $1499 price, this one with the RTX 3060 I think is the best bang for the buck out of the whole lot of them. If you want a thin and light laptop that you can game on, that has a good screen for watching videos or maybe editing your own videos, you want something with good speakers for listening to music and watching shows on, this is a good choice. Just be warned, you may need to play the lottery with it a little bit and maybe return a unit before you get a good one, because both of the units I have had issues. You may not have seen my previous video, but on the RTX 3070 version that I got, the trackpad ended up sticking in, and I ended up having to return that. Then on this RTX 3060 version, this one has really bad backlight bleed. The whole top right corner is washed out in dark scenes. And it seems that I'm not the only one with this problem, and if you look at it on this one, the top of the screen has a curve to it. The first 3070 model that I had, it did not have much backlight bleed, and I don't remember this screen having any curve to it at all. But this one, there's a definite curve to it. Because this laptop opens the full 180 degrees, if you lay it down on the table, the bend in the lid is really apparent. And if I look at it from the top, if I flatten out the corners with my fingers, it seems to alleviate the backlight bleed a lot. So I think that the light leaking is partially caused by the bent frame around the screen. So this is something that I've seen numerous other people talking about on Reddit. So it seems like if you get one that has that, you might just have to return it and then wait to get another one that hopefully doesn't have the issue. It sucks that they're having these quality control issues. Hopefully, as they keep producing them, they'll get ironed out. So if you're watching this review later, maybe this won't be as bad of an issue, but right now it's something to consider if you're shopping for the G15. Thanks for watching along. I hope this review was helpful. It's not sponsored by anybody, so if you do want to help out, you can hit the subscribe button down below or use our affiliate links in the description. Drop a comment if you have any questions or if you picked up a G15 maybe and you want to let me know what you think. And I'll see you in the next video.